Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 83 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is New York strip with mushroom, asparagus, and prosciutto flan. The great thing about this dish is that it combines the three traditional elements of a meal, a protein or meat, a veg, and a starch, but does so in a way that they're all interesting, integrated, and equally important to the dish and its appearance. The challenges of this dish are to cook the beef properly, medium rare, to make and plate a perfect flan, not too salty, and to reduce the sauce to just the right viscosity so that it doesn't run all over the dish and stays pretty much under the beef. Techniques today are chopping, sautéing and seasoning, blanching and shocking in an ice bath, slicing, beating eggs, baking in a water bath and making a flan, trimming, portioning beef, and pounding beef, sweating, deglazing, reducing, and mounting with butter, and plating. So let's start cooking. Okay, let's talk about the mise en place for lesson 83. We're going to need to have some New York strip steak. Now, the description calls for enough for 4 people, 1.5 inch thick steak, where you've trimmed off the fat, and then you have cut it once horizontally and once vertically, giving you 4 pieces. Now, I'm only preparing for 2 tonight, so I have a steak that's about 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick. It's still kind of frozen, so I haven't trimmed it yet. But later on, I'm going to trim off this fat along the top, like we've done in a prior lesson. And then I'm going to just cut it vertically to make 2 pieces. But if you had an 1.5 inch steak for 4 people, you'd cut it once horizontally and once vertically. Okay, now that is all of the, that's the beef. Now you'll also need to have about 3 ounces of prosciutto that you chopped, sautéed, and drained on paper towels, okay? Now I'm not going to show you that step because we've worked with prosciutto many times and we're in lesson 83. Also, you want to have about 2 cups of mixed wild mushrooms that you sautéed in the same pan that you used to do the prosciutto. Why? Insaporire, building flavor, okay? So you get some of that prosciutto taste that was in the olive oil that you used to do the used to do the prosciutto. So you're going to sauté about 2 cups of mushrooms in that same pan, and then you're going to chop them. Okay. Then we want to have 4 thin to medium stalks of asparagus that you have blanched, chopped in an ice bath, and then cut into 1/4 inch segments. And I cut these 1/4 inch segments. I don't know if you can see this, but I cut these 1/4 inch segments on the diagonal because they'll look better, okay? So that's 4 spears, blanched, shocked, sliced. Then you'll have to have 2 eggs that you've lightly beaten in the same bowl where you're gonna mix up the mixture that goes in the flan. Now, I'm doing this earlier in the day, so I'm not gonna beat those eggs quite yet. I'll do that later on today. You'll need to have about 1 tablespoon of butter. We're only going to be using the butter to butter the ramekins or the baking dishes, and you probably won't even need a whole tablespoon. If you have wrappers from butter, as we've used in prior episodes, you can use those, and that's what I'm probably going to use later. And I'll supplement those wrappers with maybe a little butter, extra butter. And those wrappers, remember, they're carrying butter from when they wrapped the butter up, and they're perfect for buttering things like ramekins. Then you'll need to have some olive oil. Then you'll need to have about 3 tablespoons of shallots that have been chopped, and about 2 teaspoons of garlic that have been chopped. And then you need to sweat them. We've done that many times before. I'm not going to show you that in this lesson. And I've already done that in this saucepan. You'll need a saucepan about this size. So I sweated the shallots in some olive oil, about 1 tablespoon of olive oil, and then I added, after they'd been sweated, I added the garlic and I sweated them, and then let them cool. Took them off the heat and let them cool. You'll also need to have about 1 cup of red wine. I'm probably just going to eyeball that later. You'll need to have about 1/2 cup of port, and I'll probably also eyeball that. You'll need to have about 2 tablespoons of truffle butter, either white truffle butter or black truffle butter. I prefer the aroma of the white truffle butter, but whatever you can get is good, and whatever you like is good. And also you'll need to have kosher salt and a peppermill. So that is, oh, and by the way, when you do those shallots and olive oil, I'm sorry, shallots and garlic, they'll end up mixed together in the saucepan, because that's where we're going to make our sauce. Okay, that is all the ingredients. We'll break, come back, and I'll show you the equipment for lesson 83. All right, let's talk about equipment for lesson 83. We're going to need a cutting board and a chef's knife. You also need to have a slicing knife to portion the beef. We need to have a relatively large sauté pan to do the mushrooms and the prosciutto, and a wooden spoon. We'll also need to have some paper towels to drain that prosciutto. You remember, I don't use a whole lot of paper towels in this course, so you're seeing something unique today. Although you won't actually see it because you're doing that as part of your prep before we do the lesson. We will also need to have some plastic wrap for pounding the beef. We need to have a saucepan. You've already sweated the shallots and the garlic in the saucepan. This is the saucepan we're going to use to make the sauce, okay? And then we'll need to have a bowl for an ice bath. Oh, and we'll need to have a blanching pot. That's on the stove. We're going to use that to blanch the asparagus, and then we will shock them in the ice bath in this bowl. But you're going to be doing that as part of the prep also. That's not part of the lesson. Then you're going to need a bowl and a fork to beat the eggs, and then we're going to mix our custard for the flan in this same bowl. Then you're going to need to have some ramekins for the flans. Now I'm going to try a little experiment today. We have some relatively tall ramekins. We're going to use, the description is to make for 4. I'm only making for 2, but I'm going to have extra custard because I'm giving you the amounts to make for 4, okay? So I'm going to do 2 of the flans in these ramekins, and then I'm going to do 2 in these smaller cazuelas. These are clay, made in Spain, and we'll see how they come out. Then we're going to have a pan for the water bath for when we bake the flans. And then you'll need to have a meat pounder to pound the beef. I already mentioned that you'll need to have the plastic wrap. And then we'll need to have a strainer and a spatula to strain the sauce. We need to have a brush to brush the meat with some olive oil. We'll need to have, now when it comes to the flans, we can finish them 2 ways. We can leave them in the ramekins, or we can unmold them. We're going to try it both ways today and see which one we like better. If we do unmold them, or for the ones we unmold, we're going to need to have a spatula and a knife for unmolding. Then you'll need to have a plating spoon. And then finally, you'll need to have your oven at 350 degrees when you start. Okay, that is all of the equipment. We will break, come back, and start cooking. Okay, now what we're going to do is deglaze the pan, the saucepan where we sweated the shallots and the garlic. Now, you did that earlier before we started the lesson, so they've gotten cool. So what we're going to do is heat them back up on medium heat, and then we're going to add the wine and the port. And I'm going to eyeball that about a cup of red wine, and then we're going to do about a half a cup of port. And now we have 1.5 cups of liquid in this saucepan with the shallots and the garlic. We want to reduce this to about 1/3 of a cup, okay? So you're going to bring it to a boil, then you're going to stir it occasionally, watch it, keep an eye on it, and let it reduce until it is about 1/3 of a cup. Okay, we're down to about 1/3 of a cup. It's thickened up just a little bit. Okay, next thing we're going to do is strain it. Okay, now we're going to strain the sauce into a bowl. And now you might say, well, do I have to strain it? Can't I just use it the way it is? You know the answer. The answer is, of course you can. I just think it's a bit more of an elegant sauce if you strain it, but if you want to use it with the shallots and the garlic in it, go right ahead. Okay, and then we just want to press some of that liquid out of the shallots and the garlic. We're not actually trying to press the shallots and the garlic through this strainer because we didn't puree it first, okay, so it would be kind of hard to do that. So we're just pressing out the extra liquid. Now what we want to do is rinse out the saucepan, put the sauce back into the pan, and then we're going to mount it with butter just before we plate up. Okay, the first thing we want to do is to butter the ramekins, and I'm just going to use this butter wrapper, which has a pretty good amount of residual butter on it. But if I need any more, I'll just take a little bit more. In fact, I think this wrapper is enough to do these two, but I'm going to add just another little bit of butter here to do the ramekins. Okay, I have beaten these eggs, the 2 eggs, right? And we're going to be adding to that the prosciutto and the mushrooms. And the asparagus. And the milk. You know, I'm not sure if I mentioned the milk when I was talking about ingredients earlier. It's in the description, and if I didn't mention it, I'll put a little label on the video. Standard proportion of eggs to milk to make a custard is 2 eggs to a cup of milk. That's not set in stone. You can vary that. If you want to make it a more luscious, more decadent custard, you could add an egg yolk or 2 in addition to the eggs. If you want to make, and you could do the same thing by, instead of using milk, you could use cream, or part cream and part milk. Okay, so, but the basic ratio is 2 eggs to a cup of milk. Now we're going to add some salt here. And not too much, because we have the prosciutto in there, which has its own salt. And then we're going to add some freshly ground black pepper. And we're going to mix that up. And we're going to taste it. Okay, I don't think it needs any more salt or pepper. Remember, I just tasted the egg and milk mixture, and there's also the prosciutto in there, which has salt, and the mushrooms were also seasoned when they were cooked. Okay, now we're going to fill the ramekins and the cazuelas. Now, because the cazuelas are shallower, I'm going to fill them up more. The ramekins, filling them up about 3/4 of the way. All right, now we're going to add some water to the pan here so that we have a water bath. And then we're going to put these into the oven. Remember, I'm doing this one as an experiment, and I'm doing it not in the water bath, and I'm doing 2 in the ramekins and 2 in the cazuelas. Okay, so now this is going to go into the oven at 350 degrees until it's set. Okay, now it's time to pound the beef, and we are going to cover the cutting board with some plastic wrap. I'm going to do 2 overlapping layers so I have the whole board covered. All right, now we're going to put our beef down on the board, and these are going to spread quite a bit as they are being pounded, so I'm going to leave space between them. And then we're going to cover them with another layer of plastic wrap, folded under the board. Now we're going to take our handy dandy meat pounder, the flat side, and we're going to pound these out until they're about 1/4 of an inch thick. Okay, now, you always want to bring your beef to room temperature before you cook it, as we've learned in other lessons. But I took this right out of the refrigerator and started pounding it. The pounding process helps to warm it up to room temperature. But these are going to stay now at room temperature until we cook, and it won't take too long for them, if they're not already at room temperature, it won't take too long for them to get there because they're pretty thin. Okay, now I've returned the saucepan to low heat shortly before plating, and I'm going to mount the sauce with about 2 tablespoons of truffle butter, and we're going to just swirl that in. Okay, now you can either do it with a spoon, stirring it, or you can just swirl it around, and you want to do that until all the butter has melted and has been incorporated into the sauce. Okay, let's taste it. Very good. Okay, now we want to keep this warm until we're ready to plate up. Okay, now here we have our flans, and we put in a toothpick, it comes out clean. So the time, at 350 degrees, the ones in the water bath took 40 minutes, and the one that was not in the water bath took 30 minutes. And I want you to see the difference. Around the edges of this one, it's browner, maybe a little bit crustier, okay? And then around the edges of these, they're not quite like that. They're not crusty, okay? Now, to some extent, it's a matter of taste. Most people will tell you to bake a flan or a savory custard in a water bath at 300 degrees. I use 350 degrees. I like it better. I think it works better. But you may decide that you like it better that it's not in the water bath, okay? That's why I did the experiment tonight. Now, the next thing that we're going to do, if we were to choose to do so, is to unmold these and invert them on the plate. Now, I'm not going to do that because these are so beautiful as they are. I'm going to serve them just like this in the cazuelas, in the ramekins, okay? Now, you could unmold them, take them out of the ramekin by running a knife around the edge, then inverting it on a plate, tapping on it like we've done in prior lessons, and it comes out onto the plate. Now, you're not going to see this beautiful golden top if you do that, because the top is going to be on the bottom because you've inverted it. What you'll see instead is the custard, and it'll look like a flan normally looks. It'll be a yellowish custard, and you'll see flecks from the mushrooms and the prosciutto and the asparagus. Now, you could double invert it. You could take it out of the mold, invert it onto a plate, and then invert it again, and then slide it off of the, invert it onto a spatula, and slide it off the spatula onto the plate so you can see the top. But if you're going to do that, why take it out of the ramekin at all, okay? So we're going to leave these in the ramekins tonight. We're not going to unmold them. You can do that if you like. We've done it in prior lessons. But we're going to keep these warm now until we're ready to serve. All right, now we're almost ready to cook the beef. All right, so I've folded back the top layer of plastic. We're going to brush both sides with a little olive oil, and then we're going to give them a light salt and pepper. Now, you might have noticed that I gave them just really a few grains on each side. Why did I do that? Because I'm salting and peppering both sides, and this is very thin beef, all right? So if we use too much salt, it's going to be too salty. So just did a few grains on both sides. All right, now we are ready to cook the beef, and because this beef is so thin, it's only going to take about 30 seconds per side. I put a little oil in this pan, and I've brushed the oil around. We're going to let the pan get hot, And then we're going to saute / sear the beef. Okay, our pan is hot, so we're going to add the beef. We're going to do 30 to 40 seconds per side. Okay, let's take them out. We're going to let them rest for a couple of minutes in a warm spot. Okay, here's our beef. It rested for probably 2 or 3 minutes, and looks like it's about medium rare. Yes, it is. Let's see if we can see these pieces here. Yeah, there's a nice, still a reddish tinge in the middle there. And we're going to cut into several pieces. Okay, so it's time to plate up, and you should have a little bit more than a tablespoon of sauce per person, because you reduce the sauce to about 1/3 of a cup, and then you added about 2 tablespoons of butter. Okay, so you can pool the sauce in the middle of the plate, and then we're going to take the beef and arrange it artistically on the plate. So there we go. We have the beef plated with the pool of sauce, and we're going to just serve our flan on the side, okay? So that's lesson 83, New York strip with the mushroom, asparagus, and prosciutto flan. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is at Chef's Apprentice Cook Like a Pro. Next up is fish and chips with red onion mango salsa and citrus aioli. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.